It's finally starting to warm up a little bit. The action's been red hot at FedEx Forum this week. I don't know if people realize this. There are 6 games happening in downtown Memphis this week. 4 from the Grizzlies, 2 from the Tigers. We are halfway home, I believe. Yep, we got 2 more Grizzlies games and 1 more Tiger game. Certainly a good start to the week. 3-0 for the home squad so far this week. We're going to touch on the Tigers a little bit later on, but the Grizzlies are in the middle of this 4-game homestand. Play again tonight against the New Orleans Pelicans. To the surprise of absolutely no one, Zion Williamson is not playing because of conditioning. I forgot what the number is, but Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, obviously the top 2 picks in the 2019 draft, both South Carolina kids, hyper athletic. But they, like, the amount of times that they have both been on the floor together since they came into the NBA has just been very, very limited. So it's a bit of a bummer there. Ja is actually questionable tonight with an illness. Santi Aldama left the Hornets game the other night with an illness. Maybe that's something going around Grizzlies locker room a little bit. It is that time of year where it's cold, people get sick, it gets passed around because everyone's inside, so you never know. But either way, the Grizzlies off to a 2-0 start to this homestand after beating the Hornets the other night in a game. You know, it was a 12-point deficit at the end. That was not really a 12-point game. The Grizzlies were up 30 at the half, put up 78 points in the first half. Got a little bit sloppy in the second half. The Hornets made it look more competitive than it was. I actually don't know what the spread was on that game. That had the makings of a nasty kind of backdoor cover by the Hornets there. That's coming off a win on Monday in the MLK Day game. Sorry, resident Timberwolves fan over here. Were you in the house?
No, I was here working.
Okay. Would you have been in the house otherwise?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So it's just funny the way that both of these games against the Wolves have worked out in the last 2 weeks, where the game in Minnesota was a little more high-paced, and I think it was a better, like the flow of the game was better, and both teams were executing at a higher level, but same thing where the Grizzlies come back in the fourth quarter, Timberwolves crunch time offense, I think you would say is pretty atrocious.
It's the worst in the NBA, I believe.
And both of them ended with Anthony Edwards taking a heavily contested attempt at a game-winning 3 on the wing. In Minnesota, it was Brandon Clark playing good one-on-one defense on him. Monday in Memphis, it was a tag team effort of Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr., who heavily contested the shot and comes up with an air ball, and the Grizzlies win. Yeah, I'm just curious. I asked Desmond Bane about it. I was like, did it feel like a little bit of deja vu? He was like, yeah, it felt like we were in the same situation. Did it kind of feel like that for you too?
Yes, because that's the whole season. How the whole season's gone for the Wolves. I don't think they've played in a blowout one way or the other like all
It's just
year.
been all tight games, right?
They lead the NBA in clutch games, and they've been poor in clutch games, which is why their record's not great. But it's like no matter who they're playing, it's always a close game at the end. Comes down to the clutch time. Even against Dallas the other night, it came down to the very last second. Even a Dallas team that's struggling, but
super injured.
Yeah, Kyrie went crazy, but
Just look the other night. Grizzlies did cover against the Hornets by a half point. The Grizzlies minus 11.5. So
that Hornets team is so banged up right now, too.
Yeah, Brandon Miller's out after the season with wrist surgery. That was announced yesterday. I kind of think he's their best player moving forward. You know,
over LaMelo?
Listen, man, I like LaMelo.
That's a hot take.
I like LaMelo, and I've always enjoyed watching him play because he is a wild shot maker, but he is also a wild shot taker at the same time. Yeah. And like I said, I've been a fan of his game since he came into the league. At a certain point, though, when the cycle repeats, no matter who the coach is, no matter who the surrounding cast is, that you put up numbers, but it's not really leading to any success. And then you look at the efficiency. He's shooting 42% from the field this year, 33.5% from 3. Maybe LaMelo is better.
That is pretty poor, yeah.
At the moment. I think Brandon Miller is the guy probably next year, assuming he comes back from the wrist surgery fine. And that's not really a knock on LaMelo as much as it is being high on Brandon Miller, because we've talked about this before. Brandon Miller, and this is a huge draft L on my part, because I thought the Hornets were frankly moronic for taking Brandon Miller over Scoot Henderson in that 23 draft. Obviously, Wemby went number 1 overall. I think most people thought Scoot Henderson was going to go number 2. Hornets pulled, I don't know about a stunner, but maybe a little bit of a surprising move in taking Brandon Miller number 2. I thought it was a bad move, and I was wrong. good to see Scoot Henderson kind of finding his way in Portland a little bit. But Brandon Miller is awesome, and it's what we talked about before. When you hit on that archetype of player, the athletic wing that can score at all three levels and defend, it could change everything for your franchise. It hasn't for the Hornets yet, but I think he is in that kind of mold of player.
I think he's among the leaders in like 3-point attempts this year as well.
Your
He's
boy,
just launching it.
your boy Anthony Edwards is leading the league, is he not?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Which is kind of
By
wild.
a pretty good margin still, I think.
Let me just look at Brandon. Brandon Miller is
is
here
dominant.
before he got hurt. He's averaging 21, 5, 3.5 assists. Okay, these efficient numbers ain't great. 40% from the field. 35 from 3 is respectable. It's actually better than LaMelo. And he's taking 11 a game. So, yeah, he was letting that thing fly.
11 a game is quite a bit.
Mark Williams had a really big game for them the other night. 38 points, a new career high. I think Mark Williams is a good player. I think the Hornets at least have a couple of interesting pieces. Whether it's ever going to come together in this current iteration is a different story, because behind LaMelo, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, and Miles Bridges, it's a whole bunch of With the exception of, I kind of like Josh Green a little bit.
I also
okay.
like, he's hurt right now, but I like Trey Mann too.
Yes, yeah. The thing is, Trey Mann is always going to be the
while.
backup to LaMelo because he's just a bucket.
Yeah.
He is just a straight bucket.
But I like him as a sixth man.
Grizzlies, though, Luke Kennard on fire. I mean, 7-11 from 3. And I feel like with Luke, the thing that I've seen lately, and to be honest, I haven't asked him about it. I'm not sure if someone has. It feels like early in the season, he was only shooting threes when he was wide open. And I mean wide open. And when your main purpose is to be out there taking threes, at a certain point, and when you are a shooter the quality of Luke Kennard, who after the other night is now, it can't be, this is a pretty wild stat. He is second in the history of the NBA in three-point percentage behind Steve Kerr. I mean, Kennard is, I'm not saying he is Steph Curry or Klay Thompson. I'm not putting him amongst like the greatest shooters of all time, just like with the volume and the difficulty in them. But Kennard is in a lot of ways an historically great shooter. So I need you to let that thing fly, even if there is a little contest. Like, I can't just have you take a wide open threes. And I think that he's been going off the bounce a little bit more lately as well, which I'm not saying I need Luke driving to the basket a million times a game. But, like, when he was in Detroit, he was handling a good amount of point guard-ish duties. He was able to handle the ball. Again, on this team, when you have the amount of ball handlers Grizzlies do, it's not something I need to see over and over again, but I need to see you can do it. And lately, he's been doing that. So, 23 for him. Jared Jackson Jr. had 22. Desmond Bane. Remember when Grizzlies fans were freaking out saying they should maybe look at trading Desmond Bane because he had a slow first 6 weeks of the season?
That was never a good take.
Horrendous take. 24, 8 assists for him. See more of the playmaking from him lately and the shots coming back. Phenomenal player. Awesome player. Just any way you look at it. And shout out Dez, too. TCU basketball, his alma mater, is going to retire his #1 coming up in February. So I know that'll be, I think it's right after All-Star Weekend. So he'll be able to go there and be in the house for that. So that'll be cool to see. Jared Jackson Jr., I said it the other night. When you watch Grizzlies games now, watch Jaren. You can't guard him one-on-one anymore unless you have an elite post defender. Like, I'm talking like an Anthony Davis type or a Wemby or someone like that. Because Mark Williams and who else for the Hornets? Miles Bridges, his Michigan State brethren, these guys had no shot one-on-one against Jaren in the post. I mean, he has become such a dominant isolation scorer. Throw the ball into him in the post. He's so much more physical than he used to be. He's got the hook with both hands. He's got the power. He's got the athleticism. Obviously, he's got the threat of the three-point shot. Man, it's just like you realize as the game goes on, the gravity that he attracts in terms of guys having, you have to shade his way. If you're not going to straight up double him, you have to at least throw a body in his direction. That obviously opens things up so much more for everything else. It's just, the leap he has taken this year, it can't be talked about enough because it kind of changes the entire ceiling of the Grizzlies as a franchise, no?
Yeah. We were talking about before the season, I think this was one of the weeks you were out, but just how underrated Jaren Jackson Jr. is. We went over the NBA 100 list. And
he was like 50-something or 40?
He was so low.
Way down there.
And now that his offensive game is developing, you got to look at him as one of the best two-way players in the
Yeah.
league. One of the best handful of them, at least.
I think I tweeted this a couple weeks ago. The only big guys in the league right now this season that I can definitively say have been better than Jaren Jackson Jr. It was Jokic, Giannis, and probably Wemby. After that, I would say
Maybe Towns.
I think Jaren is in a tier with Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Davis.
Okay, sure.
But the thing is, when you look at Jaren's raw numbers, the volume numbers, they don't compare to Towns and Anthony Davis. Guess what? As a Knicks fan, Tom Thibodeau playing Karl Anthony Towns a lot of minutes. So, and Anthony Davis plays a lot of minutes as well. Jaren's per 36 minutes are on par, at least scoring-wise, with those guys. If you want to discuss Jaren versus AD and Towns, you'd probably say Jaren is on par. I think it's fair to say Jaren's on par with Anthony Davis as a defender. Anthony Davis, Karl Anthony
He's got
Towns.
more trophies.
Yeah, right. He's got a Defensive Player of the Year trophy. Anthony Davis does not. Whether Anthony Davis deserved one at some point, probably a fair enough argument, discussion. But Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Davis are both better rebounders than Jaren. Karl Anthony Towns better shooter than Jaren. Jaren's better shooter than Anthony Davis. So he's at least in that tier. So probably a top 5 to 6 big man in the league this year. I know Sam Vecini, who does great work in The Athletic, I saw a clip the other day. He has Jaren Jackson Jr. second team All-NBA right now, which is, if you were thinking about Jaren's ceiling a couple years ago, you probably thought, okay, maybe he could get to that level. Well, he's here now. He is at that level now where he is at least in those discussions.
Yeah, that puts him at third or fourth best big man in the league.
Yeah, which I don't know
I think he's deserving. I definitely think we need to see him on the All-Star team this year.
Yes, which those the starters came out.
But yeah.
Starters came out last night. He needs to be on the team. If he's not on the team, it would frankly be a joke.
Yeah.
He's not going to win the popularity contest against LeBron and KD and guys like that. That's fine. But he needs to be a reserve on that team for sure. He is, and I think coming into the season, most people would have said if the Grizzlies were going to have one All-Star, it probably would have been Ja Morant. It needs to be Jaren Jackson Jr. And that's probably true whether Ja was healthy or not. So, big props to him.
Absolutely.
This is another example the other day. Ja, the other night, 16 points, 13 assists, made that sick play, catching the alley-oop out of midair, and then telling Jalen Wells, get to the corner, dish in the ball, Wells hits the three. We've talked about it a bunch this year. We don't have to see Ja Morant take over games every night now or be this super high-usage player that gets all the crunch time shots. In fact, in the Minnesota game the other day, when they needed buckets late, they were throwing the ball to Jaren Jackson Jr. a lot. Now, Ja had an and one in that game that was pretty sick. He had a fallaway jumper. Desmond Bane hit what ended up being the go-ahead bucket for good, the little floater over Naz Reid. But they've got options now, man. That's the thing. So, back home tonight against the Pelicans, who, like we've talked about before, just terrible injury luck this year. Do we have a schedule we want to pop up real quick?
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. Let's do that. Yeah, I mean, the Pelicans are still 12-32, which is...
Yeah, they have been playing better lately, but...
They're on a 4-game win streak, but they just dug themselves such a hole.
And you're without Zion and still without Brandon Ingram, Herb Jones. So.
Yeah, Herb Jones probably out for the season, which is unfortunate. So next 2 nights, you got a back-to-back tonight and tomorrow against the 2 worst teams in the Western Conference, New Orleans, 12-32 on the year, like we talked about. No Zion, no Brandon Ingram tonight. And then tomorrow night against the 10-32 Cooper Flag sweepstakes-bound Utah Jazz. Then off to New York on Monday to face the Knicks in a game I will be totally neutral in observing. Actually, basically similar records, too. The Knicks are 29-16, Grizzlies are 29-15 right now. Thursday night, next Thursday against Houston is the one. Actually, to be honest, that whole 3-game stretch is what I've got my eye on because we've talked about it before. We know the Grizzlies can beat up on bad teams. We know the Grizzlies can beat up on teams that are kind of in the play-in discussion in the West. But you're playing the Knicks on the road, and then you're home against a Houston team that has had your number 3-0 against you this year and has kind of beat you up physically as well. And then you go on the road to face Giannis and the Bucks, who, credit Giannis, credit Dame Lillard, credit Doc Rivers, because I thought they were done for early in the season. They've gotten this thing turned around. They were in New Orleans during that snowstorm flew out of there yesterday, landed in Milwaukee at like 5 o'clock on like a 2-hour turnaround, just smacked the Heat at home. Obviously, the Heat have their own issues right now, but which we get hit on shortly in a second.
I did want to mention that, but yeah, we can circle back.
But that's a 3-game stretch. Listen, I know the Grizzlies can beat up on these teams. I need to see the Grizzlies beat up on teams that they are going to have to beat come May. I need to see it because, they've had one game against OKC. Ja wasn't playing. They had a million injuries on the road. Fine. But they're 0-3 against Houston. They're 1-1 against Denver. Lakers, they're 1-2 against. They lost to the Clippers. I need to see you beat teams that you are likely going to play. If not in the first round, definitely in the second round. It just has to happen. And when I see them do that, I'll have a better idea of what their ceiling is. But right now, it just is what it is. I think they're a good team. I don't know if they are a team that is capable of winning multiple playoff series just because when they've stacked up against the teams that they are going to be playing in those situations in May and June, I just haven't seen enough of it yet.
Yeah, Houston's the big one because those games have gone really poorly, and Houston has an equation that some team is going to have to solve when the playoffs starts, is how do you beat all of these guys that they just throw at you, great defenders, just all game long.
And I think they're the most athletic team in the league.
Yeah. So that team's going to be a problem for anyone. I mean, I don't know that they have the scoring to get it done, but,
good. I was going to say, it's got to be mentioned, too, the last 2 losses for the Grizzlies, and I know the Grizzlies have had their own injury concerns. I'm well aware. No Jabari Smith for Houston, and even if he's not the star, maybe people thought he was going to be coming out of the draft a couple years ago. Still a quality player that is going to be heavily in the rotation whenever he's healthy. But go ahead.
You just got to beat these good teams. They're, 5-12 against the West, which is not a bad number, but it's worse than Denver, who's below you. It's worse than the Lakers, who are below you. And the West is so cutthroat. You really, Golden State rather is down at the 11th seed, and they have a 500 record against the West. So, kind of strange how that's working.
Like I said, I think the Grizzlies will be fine. I don't think they're bound for the play-in, but if you want to see this team hit their ceiling,
it would be a big collapse if they made the play-in.
Yeah, because they're 5.5 games up on the play-in right now. So, but you still want home court advantage for at least one series, ideally 2. But I got to see it. I just got to see them beat up. Man, go to New York and go win a game. Go beat the Knicks at MSG. I swear I'll be neutral about it. Beat the Rockets, man. The Rockets are 3-0 against you this year.
We need that.
With 2 guys that were prominently on your team a couple of years ago, contributing.
We need that home court. At the Grindhouse in the playoffs is a totally different atmosphere.
Although it didn't help them a couple years ago. But again, the Lakers a couple years ago were a really bad matchup. But the Grizzlies are 17-5 at home this year, which is the only teams better at home this season are the Cavs, who are 21-2, and OKC 19-3. So the 2 best teams in the league. Again, I think the Grizzlies are good. Do I think the Grizzlies are elite? Proof of concept I'm seeing right now probably tells me no. Do I think they have a chance to get there this year? Yes. Do I think the trade deadline is going to factor kind of heavily into that? What kind of move they make? Yes. On that, though, let's talk about the report that came out yesterday. It's actually a report that was out a couple weeks ago, but it was re-emphasized yesterday by Mark Spears that basically Jimmy Butler and all this drama with the Heat, and he wants out, and now the Heat have suspended him for the second time in 3 weeks because he missed the team flight, and he wanted to take a private charter to Milwaukee last night, yada, yada, all this. To me, that situation's stupid. To me at this point, it's clearly not going to work.
It's been stupid at all of his stops.
It's got to, hold him out until you find a trade partner. Because, I'll be honest, him playing or not playing, if he's out there loafing it like he has been since this has all gone down, it's not hurting his trade stock because everyone knows he's loafing it. And everyone knows what he can do when he is engaged.
Especially in the playoffs.
Right. And he is probably more than any other player in the league a playoff riser in terms of, you think of regular season Jimmy Butler, you're he's probably a top 20 player in the league. Playoff Jimmy Butler, you're that dude's definitely a top 10 player in the league, which is how he raised his game.
Yeah.
So playing him or holding him out, either way, it's not going to hurt his stock. To me, if I'm the Heat, this situation is clearly a distraction at this point. You're 21-22. You're in the play-in. I mean, you've got some cushion because you've got 3 games on the Bulls who have the 10th spot right now. God, the East is so bad past a certain point. And
the Bulls are the 10s?
They are the 10
right
at 19-26.
That's rough.
And Philly is the 11 at 15-27. So you have 5.5 games on them, and Joel Embiid is just permanently taking PTO. The Paul George situation isn't working out. Jared McCain's out for the year. So I think they're going to make the play-in, but it just has to be taking a toll. I don't care how good your culture is. This has to be taking a toll on the organization. You're suspending him, and he's back, but he's not going to be full effort, and then you're going to suspend him again. Just hold him out and trade him and figure out something. Back to the original point was that Mark Spears basically said yesterday, which I think Chris Haynes said this a couple weeks ago, but Mark Spears basically said, Butler, his main goal is to get out of Miami unless it is a trade to Memphis. So, and apparently Butler's goal is wherever he gets traded next, he wants to retire there. He's 35. He's got a player option that he's probably going to opt out of this offseason. He'll be a free agent, probably get one more bag and retire. So we've heard all the usual suspect destinations. Phoenix probably being the primary one. They made this trade this week to get a prime first-round pick in give away a first-round pick in 2031.
That was a strange.
To get 3 first-round picks in return. I get the vision with it. It's like they have the option of Phoenix basically gets the worst of those picks, or whoever ends up with these picks gets the worst of them, and that 2031 first-round pick. Listen, I would be fading the Phoenix Suns heavily, 5 years down the road, just given you have an aging core of KD and Booker and whatnot. So, yeah, I would be fading that pick heavily and be interested in that. But either way, the Suns are clearly trying to get more capital for a trade. Suns' problem, obviously.
They're trying to get off of Beal's contract.
They're trying to get off Beal's contract. No one wants that contract.
No.
Which I get. No. But, you've heard the suspects. Golden State, Phoenix, Dallas. But to me, I think the Grizzlies, from a basketball perspective, make more sense than all of them. And now the rumblings are kind of coming out that, I think Brian Windhorst reported this, the Grizzlies might be interested in trading for Butler, getting off the salary of the assets they would trade out, letting Butler walk this offseason, and then using that money to extend Jaren Jackson Jr., which would be interesting. I mean,
so an obvious rental situation.
Yes, and a rental that they're cool with. Kind of like a half-season Kawhi Leonard situation in Toronto. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to work out that well, but my issue with that is we have seen what this player can be when he does not like his situation. And he will kind of actively sabotage it. It is a heck of a dice roll. Could it maybe be worth it? I've kind of been on the side of I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze with Butler. If he comes in fully engaged, then he could be the piece that takes him over the top. To me, I just don't want to give up too many future assets to make it happen.
I think the idea of that trade is awesome, except for the fact that now we're hearing that he wants to go to any team except Memphis.
Right.
Which is a huge flag. No, don't do that.
And again, if he comes here and gives the half-ass effort he's been giving with the Heat, that could end badly, because then you have sacrificed your depth, and you have a star player that is kind of actively sabotaging your situation, and I would imagine toxic in a pretty tight-knit locker room right now. Yeah. So I'm not saying, at a certain point you probably have to take a risk to maybe get over the hump. I'm not sure this is the risk I'm willing to take.
It definitely feels like, and we've mentioned this throughout the year, that the Grizzlies kind of have a roster that is in prime position to make a trade, just because of the embarrassment of riches that they have on the wing.
Right, and they almost have too many guys right now.
They really do.
I think we have kind of run into that problem where they probably have 13 or 14 guys you can play, and when you throw Vince Williams Jr. in there when he gets back, probably 13 or 14 guys that you could play. Brother, you're not playing 13 or 14 guys in a playoff game.
And Gigi played 10 minutes the other night.
Right.
You're going to ramp his minutes up eventually. Only 19 minutes for Santi. There's a ton of guys. There's got to be more minutes to go, right?
Yeah.
But
I think in theory,
ED,
your rotation is obviously your starting five: Ja, Jaren Dez, Jalen Wells, Edie, Brandon Clark's going to play, Santi's going to play, Gigi's going to play, Vince Williams Jr. is going to play.
Marcus Smart.
But do trade Smart.
Yeah, right. I mean, he's one of the guys that would be up there.
Right. I don't think, the only guy that got a DNP the other night, coach's decision, was John Conchar. But, obviously, Jitty, I think Jitty, in theory, gets traded in any big deal because of the money side. I don't think Scottie Pippen Jr. is going to play in the playoffs right now. And I think Scottie Pippen Jr. is a fine backup point guard, but he's not playing. Yeah. I don't think Jay Huff is going to play in the playoffs right now.
Only 7 minutes the other night for him.
He made the most of those 7 minutes, though. 5 of 6, 3 of 6 from deep, 5 of 8 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3. I mean, he was shooting that thing. So, I feel
more.
It just feels like they have to consolidate a little bit because they need probably one more higher-end player that's actually going to get real minutes. Because, you just can't play. You're not playing all these guys in the playoffs. And I think at a certain point, you need to figure out what your rotation is, kind of figure out which lineups are you going to lean on the most in these important games, and go from there. So, remains to be seen. Trade deadline is, I believe, February 6th, which is a little under. It's 2 Thursdays from now. So, I expect activity is going to ramp up a little bit. All right, enough Grizzlies talk for now. We'll come back. We're going to talk about that harem-scarum Memphis Tigers win at FedEx Forum last night over Wichita State. We will take a 30-second break and be right back with you.
Go fast, keep going. 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 Go fast, keep going.
All right, welcome back to the Fast Five Sports alongside Jacob Gallant. I am Matt Infield. Like we mentioned, Memphis teams are perfect at FedEx Forum this week, and that is true after the 24th ranked Memphis Tigers defeated Wichita State last night, 61-53. Jacob, if you will roll the video, please. It was a revenge game of sorts for one, Colby Rogers, who obviously played for Wichita State last year, was their leading scorer, hit the dagger on Memphis in the conference tournament. He did not have a great night, though. He was 1 of 10 from the field. He shot, a bunch of his shots were way off the mark, threw air balls off the backboard and whatnot. This was his one make right here. Now, I mean, the first half was just nightmare stuff for Memphis. 14 turnovers. Wichita State was up 27-23 at the half. This fellow right here, Harlan Beverly, had 18 points. He played a pretty good game for them. Second half, it must be said, much better, especially defensively. Tyrese Hunter was big. He came up with a couple of huge defensive plays. PJ Haggerty was knocked out of the game briefly. He got hit in the mouth. Petty said he just busted his lip after the game. I think he broke his tooth. I swear I saw PJ Haggerty out there missing a front tooth. So, curious to see what he looks like against UAB on Sunday. But came back in the game, hit this pretty important bucket late, kind of a dagger. Tigers outscored Wichita State 38-26 in the second half. Held them to 4 points in the final 7 minutes and 18 seconds. So great defensive effort late, but still, the turnovers really, really tough. So asked Petty Hardaway post-game if he was happy, if they showed him something, or if they just kind of passed the ball here. Here's what he had to say.
Showed me something because it was a tough game. I mean, Wichita was in control of the game, and we found a way to flip it in our favor with that group that was on the floor. And winning close games, I mean, I hate having tough games at home, but winning tough games shows you who you're really working with.
I think it's good, that we're learning out of a win. You don't want to learn out of an L, and just moping around, whatever. Especially like what our situation is, like I said, the turnover situation. I think that was like our biggest thing.
All right, Petty Hardaway and Tyrese Hunter after the win. So, look, 8-point win, really good second half. They put the clamps on defensively. Also pretty lucky that 20 turnovers in the game, only turned into how many points? Which Wichita State scored 12 points off of 20 Memphis turnovers. In comparison, Wichita State actually had the turnover bug in the second half. They ended up with 22 in the game. Memphis scored 18 points off those turnovers. Same discussion we've had for weeks now, with the exception of the FAU game in conference play. Kind of sleepwalk, come out flat. You do just enough at the end, with the exception of the loss to Temple on the road. Here's what I've said for a couple weeks now. As long as they are not losing these games at home, I think they'll be okay. I think they can lose 3, maybe 4 conference games and be all right in terms of not having to go to the conference tournament with the mindset that you have to win the whole thing to get to the NCAA tournament. Mm-hmm. But no one feels good about that performance last night. Again, you won by 8. It's fine. Like, it's much better. Like Tyrese Hunter said, it's much better to learn off a W than an L. But, like, the turnovers are a really big concern because they had, once again, I know I brought up the stat before. As of last week, they were the only team in the top 25 with a negative assist to turnover ratio. Last night, 6 assists to 20 turnovers. I mean, abysmal. It has to be better than that. So, and I think we saw last night too, and you could say this for a lot of teams, take the star player out of the equation, yada, yada, I get it. This team without P.J. Haggerty would be in a real world of hurt because, and I had the thought, I was shooting the game last night, when he got his mouth busted last night with like 4 minutes left, kind of out there like, okay, do they have enough to close this game? And I trust Tyrese Hunter in those situations, but Colby Rogers having a poor shooting night, if it's not P.J. Haggerty, who is it going to be? And thankfully he came back in after he got the bleeding to stop and helped close the game out. Tyrese Hunter, must be said too, had a couple of huge defensive plays. So just enough. It's just not inspiring at all.
Yeah, you want to see more than 2 guys with double-figure scoring. So yeah, I mean, they really got to rely on Haggerty going forward. But it's an easy schedule coming up too. You mentioned the conference.
Yeah, do we have that?
Sure do.
All right, let's take a look at it. Because in theory, these are all quote-unquote easy games.
Yeah.
They make them look much tougher than they are on paper, at least. Home against UAB on Sunday. The preseason pick by the coaches to win the conference, which is kind of funny, although they're playing better right now. At Tulane next week, always a tough place to play, a place that's given Memphis a little bit of trouble the last couple of years. On the road at Rice next weekend. You got to win. I mean, you got to win at the very minimum the Rice game. And then home against Tulsa, which is the worst team in the conference, and then home for maybe a little bit of revenge against Temple. I am really curious to see how they come out on Sunday because UAB, like I said, preseason pick to win the conference, got off to a really slow start. They're playing a lot better lately. That game last year here was actually fireworks. UAB got up to, I think UAB was up 17 at the half last year, and then Memphis played one of the best halves I've seen covering this program in 3 years, and Andy Kennedy got ejected. It was a very fun second half, but asked PJ Carter post-game last night if they had any extra motivation for that game, just given where UAB was projected preseason, and he said, nah, we're just treating it like any other game. We've got bigger goals. I get that. I don't want to see them sleepwalk out Sunday because last night you're sitting there and you're like, they're going to win. They're going to win. I think they're going to win. Oh, they might be in a little bit of trouble. And eventually they pull it together. And like I said, all credit to them because their defense was awesome in closing the game last night. But in a conference where every game is a landmine, at a certain point, I think your luck is going to kind of run out a little bit.
You almost seeing the similarities with the football team this year. Kind of sleepwalking through a lot of games that you should have dominated.
Well, and I think the difference is, the conference in football, I think, was maybe a little better than basketball.
I would say better, yeah.
Although the American, like we said, it's just not a good league across the board.
Yeah.
in basically any sport. And as I saw something today. The American right now is behind Conference USA in KenPom in terms of like conference strength and schedule. It's the 10th best conference in America right now.
The Tigers' old stomping grounds.
Yeah, right. And Memphis is doing a lot of the heavy lifting there. So, I will say, Petty has talked about this team is a lot closer and more tight-knit than last year's group, which just splintered and turned on each other as soon as things started going off the rails in conference play. I think he's correct about that. I don't think that's lip service. Being around these guys, I do think they genuinely like each other, and there's not going to be chemistry issues that tear this team apart. But he said something interesting last night, that he's going to work more hands-on with the guards moving forward, because clearly they're at their best when they're playing through P.J. Haggerty and Tyrese Hunter. And there were way too many turnovers. I want to look last night. There were a lot of turnovers last night from guys not named Haggerty and Hunter. So PJ had 5, Tyrese had 3, but then you got 2 from Jourdain. You got 2 from Musa Cisse. You've got 5 from Dane Danjo. I think Dane's a good player, but Dane can get a little bit loose with the ball in the post. If they get that cleaned up, they can beat anybody. But I'm telling you, this turnover problem is one that could cost them multiple conference games. It could cost them the conference tournament, and it will surely, if they make the big dance, cost them against a good team in March. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. So,
Yep.
I don't know. Like, my thing is, I thought this team would legitimately be more up for some of these lesser opponents in conference play. Basically, I didn't think it would be a repeat from last year, where they rolled through non-conference, they were super hyped for all these big-time games, and we saw that this year. But I thought the difference with this year's team would be that you've got a P.J. Haggerty who was at Tulsa last year. You've got a Colby Rogers who was at Wichita State last year. P.J. Carter was at UTSA. Nick Jourdain here last year at Temple previously. So you've got a bunch of guys who have played in the conference before, who understand, 1, what it takes on a night-to-night basis, 2, have been on the other side of playing Memphis. And I think to a man, all of them have said, when you're in the American and you play Memphis, you get up for that one. That's one that is on your that's on your radar. That's a game that could change your whole season. So I thought they would maybe have a little bit more hunger against the Charlottes and the East Carolinas and the North Texases. And they did for FAU, but that's a bit of a rivalry game. So where it goes from here, I would like to see the team that came out and just absolutely smoked FAU. Let me see that Sunday against UAB, a team that the coaches in the league said was better than you preseason. So
Yeah.
we'll see. As long as they're winning games, they'll be okay with some minimal losses. But you keep sleepwalking through enough of these, especially on the road against some of these teams, and you're going to rack up a couple of L's that you shouldn't get. All right, enough Tigers talk. Big weekend in the NFL coming up. Big week on the coaching carousel as well. So we're going to take a 30-second break and hit on all of that. Lots of football talk coming up next on Fast 5 Sports. Keep it tuned in.
Go fast, keep going. 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 Go fast.
this feels like the year that the Bills are ever going to do it. It should be this year.
Yeah, Chiefs are favored by 2 going.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, I said last week it just felt like the Ravens' year to do it because, like, what else can you do with that team to improve it? The Bills, I mean, I trust in Josh Allen. It's just like at this point it's the Chiefs until it's not. So maybe this is the year that they finally kick him out of the Super Bowl. But it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a good game. I think Bills-Ravens last week, I think clearly the conditions played an element. You know, you think about, like, Lamar letting the ball slip out of his hands, even, I think, kind of like the Andrews two-point conversion where he's falling down. I felt like the Bills were better equipped to handle the elements in that game than the Chiefs were, or than the Ravens were, and it showed a little bit. I will say, I know we turned the ball over twice, and I'm glad, like, the narratives this week haven't been too out of control. I think Lamar Jackson was better than Josh Allen that game. I know Josh Allen didn't turn the ball over. Allen was largely a game manager, and his legs were a big threat in the low red zone. He scored 2 touchdowns, but Lamar, and I'm saying, I know this is a huge if you take away the 2 turnovers, or even acknowledging the 2 turnovers, I think it's pretty lights out the rest of the game. And you think about what should have been the game-time drive, 88 yards in like 2 minutes, throws a rope over the middle to, it was Isaiah Likely that scored that touchdown to make it 27-25. And, man, some of the discussions this week about Lamar threw the 2-point conversion too late or was it accurate? No, I think that play was executed exactly how it's supposed to. You kind of want the tight end falling, going towards the pylon, bring it into the chest, and then you could fall down, and you're right at the line. And you're in for what should be the 2-point conversion. Obviously, Mark Andrews, usually a very reliable player, one of his worst games of his career, I would imagine. So, tough for the Ravens. I think to answer your question, how do they get better? I think they need a real wide receiver 3 because, again, on that, an underrated aspect of that 88-yard drive that should have tied the game for the Ravens. Those 8 Flowers in that game.
Right.
Wide receiver 1. And Rashad Bateman, who, cool to see him emerge this year after he was a really heralded prospect coming out of the draft when he was at Minnesota. Rashad Bateman got hurt early in that last drive. So Lamar's driving down the field with, the 2 tight ends, obviously, Likely and Andrews, and then Tylan Wallace and Nelson Aguilar and I don't even know who the third receiver was. So, yeah, underrated part of that as well. And I do think that the Ravens missed Zay Flowers in this game a little bit. But, talk about Chiefs-Bills. It feels like if Patrick Mahomes is this year's or this generation's Tom Brady, then it's time for Josh Allen to have his Peyton Manning get over the hump moment. Because think about early 2000s, the Patriots and the Colts would play each other in the playoffs over and over again. And the Patriots and Brady always had the upper hand. And it fed into this narrative that Peyton was bad in the playoffs, that he couldn't win the big game and whatnot. Eventually, 2006, Colts beat the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Colts go on to win the Super Bowl, Peyton's first of his career. It's time for Josh Allen to have that kind of moment. On the road, tough environment, a place where he's had success before in the regular season. It just hasn't always translated in the playoffs from a team perspective, because I think part of the conversation with Josh Allen as well, we think about some of these playoff losses. The 2021 to a game was played January 2022. The overtime game, Mahomes 13-second drive. I mean, Allen was lights out in that game. Allen was incredible in that game. Circumstances just dictated that it wasn't good enough. And even last year, in the playoffs against the Chiefs, I think he played a pretty good game. Mahomes was just better. Remember the Tyler Bass kick that ended up in Lake Ontario that kind of did them in. So I think they got a good shot. I don't know if this is the worst Chiefs offense. I don't know if this Chiefs offense is worse than last year because I think they have more guys, but they're all just kind of guys right now, with the exception of Kelsey as his playoff riser. Xavier Worthy's come along. He's got better. DeAndre Hopkins, though, was a non-factor last week. So was Hollywood Brown. So I kind of wouldn't be shocked if this is a little bit of a lower scoring affair than people are expecting. Both defenses are really good. Spags, obviously, Steve Spagnuolo, Chiefs defense coordinator, knows how to dial it up at this time of year. So, I don't know. I kind of feel like this might be the Bills' time to get over the hump, but at the same time, it's just really tough to bet against Patrick Mahomes at this time of year.
If this game wasn't at Arrowhead, I would feel a lot better about the Bills' chances. But
Yeah.
they haven't lost at home all year. Rarely lose at home in the playoffs. So, yeah, it just feels like it's going to be inevitably the Chiefs again to me.
I believe we have.
I would love to see a Josh Allen masterclass. I mean,
Sunny and 33, I believe, is what we're looking at. Or maybe a little bit cloudy. Yeah, cloudy and 33. So all that to say, it does not sound like conditions are going to be an enormous factor.
It'll
just be
the
cold.
atmosphere of Arrowhead.
Right. It'll just be cold.
Enough.
And Arrowhead's obviously a really tough place to play.
Right.
So we'll see. I think I've got. I'm going Bills all fives again.
All right.
I'm rooting for the
All right.
Chiefs just as an AFC East fan myself. I've got to root against the Bills. I don't hate the Bills. I don't even hate Josh Allen. But if you give me the choice of AFC West team, Patrick Mahomes, or AFC East team, I'm rolling with the opposition. So I think the Bills will win, but I'll root for the Chiefs. Although the Bills are 5-4 on the road this season, which is a little bit interesting to pair with Chiefs 8-0 at home. I don't know. It just kind of feels like this is the year for Allen and the Bills to kind of get over that hump. But I will say, something I'll keep an eye on, Sean McDermott kind of notorious for coaching tight in these big games. And Andy Reid is the opposite. So will Sean McDermott get in the way of the Bills potentially winning this game with some of his decision-making? To be determined. I definitely know who I'm rooting for in the NFC Championship game. I mean, unless you are from Philadelphia or that general area, I don't know how you're not rooting for the Commanders and Jaden Daniels. I didn't have the gall to pick them over the Lions last week. I think I said they would put up points. I just thought the Lions would put up more. Nope. Commanders defense came up super clutch. I think it was 5 turnovers forced in the game.
I believe it was 5, yeah.
3 Jared Goff interceptions. One of them was like a garbage time one when the game was over. A Jameson Williams interception, which was all-time funny.
Unreal.
And a
That
Jared
you
Goff
let
fumble.
him throw the ball in that scenario. Just
With your season on the line. And at that point in the game, were they down 14? I think they were down 14. I mean,
sounds right.
Clock was ticking, but I think there was like 8 minutes left. You just kind of had to go put a drive together and then get a stop on the other side, which, to be fair, with the way the Lions defense was playing and the way Jaden Daniels was cooking up, I don't know if they were going to get that stop. But at the same time, the Jameson Williams hold on to the ball, throw an interception, looking for Jahmyr Gibbs, who didn't even turn around for the ball. All-time funny moment. So, Lions, I feel bad for the Lions because this
You
definitely
live and
felt
die.
like it could have been the Lions' year before all the injuries.
Did you see this stat that hurt my soul? They're the second team to win 15 games and not win a playoff game. You know the first? The
2011 Packers.
2011 Packers, yeah.
2011 Packers, who lost to the Giants twice.
Brutal.
Yeah, tough. I know, a little bit different 17-game season because that Packers team was 15-1.
And yeah,
But yeah, so tough for the Lions just because we're going to hit on they've lost both coordinators now. The golf contract is going to be a little more substantial moving forward.
the cap hit is like $60 million in a couple years. Whew.
So yeah, but I don't really look at it as I'm now a little bit biased towards the Lions defense coordinator because he's the new head coach of the Jets. I don't really look at what happened Saturday as like a failure of coach or anything like that. I think they ran out of guys, man.
Yeah.
And someone showed a graphic of their defensive depth chart and just the amount of first and second string guys that were hurt, and they lost more in the game. Amik Robertson, who's a pretty solid corner for them this year, broke his humerus bone really early in the game. They had more guys go out. At a certain point, it's just too much, especially when you're facing an offense that's clicking the way Washington's was in that game. So now we get Commanders-Eagles, Part 3. First game this year, first matchup went the way of the Eagles. That was a Thursday night game. Interesting game because that was right after Jaden Daniels hurt his rib. And I think that did affect him for a couple weeks. And the Eagles really kind of made the Commanders' offense look silly. Then they played again. It would have been week 17, I believe. That was a game where Jalen Hurts left early with a concussion. Eagles offense was cooking early in that game. And then Commanders come back. Jane Daniels had 5 total touchdowns in that game. He had like 3. I think the Commanders had 3 turnovers as well, although a couple of them were kind of fluky. I know Brian Robinson had 2 fumbles, but Jane Daniels throws the game-winning touchdown with like 15 seconds left to Olamide Zaccheaus. It truly is kind of like the mark of a good quarterback, though, is that obviously we knew Terry McLaurin was a good player and he's had a career year with Jane Daniels. Jane Daniels has made De'Ami Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus relevant because largely he has been that good. So, man, Eagles 6-point favorites in this game. I think this week, that's a pretty sizable number.
That is a big line.
I think I'm going Commanders this week. I know it is wild to pick a rookie quarterback to go on the road in a hostile environment and win an NFC championship game, especially when I think the roster on the other side is better. But I don't know, man. This kid's just got some magic to him. Jalen Hurts, injured. I know he's a full participant in practice all week. He's going to play. I find it hard to believe he's going to be as mobile as he usually is, and that's a factor as well. Quinyon Mitchell looks like he's going to play, which is pretty big because he clamped up Terry McLaurin the first time these teams played. If they didn't have him, I think I would really heavily lean towards Washington in this game. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of just feeling the Commanders right now, and maybe that's me, just kind of riding the wave of positivity around Jay Daniels. But, yeah, give me the Commanders.
There is something to be said about the vibes, and just Jaden Daniels is playing so well right now. But I'm taking the Eagles. I don't think they're going to be able to contain Saquon. That Eagles offense is just clicking.
What a player, man.
I mean, yeah. I think the Eagles are going to be too much for him.
I think I said this. I think the lesson to be learned this year, I think that the pendulum swung too far the other way on evaluating running backs. I think what we learned, though, this year is, and Saquon and Derrick Henry are 2 prime examples of it. If your roster stinks, a luxury, like a great star running back is a luxury that will not make a huge difference. Yeah. Like the Titans and the Giants, I know they got heat for letting those guys walk this year, and to a lesser degree, the Raiders letting Josh Jacobs walk and what he did with the Packers. Those 3 teams, the Raiders would have stunk with Josh Jacobs, the Titans would have stunk with Derrick Henry, the Giants would have stunk with Saquon Barkley. I don't think it was wrong for any of those teams to let those guys walk. But when you have an already good offense in place and a good ecosystem, a star running back can help take that to the next level. Because clearly Saquon Barkley has elevated this Eagles offense. Derrick Henry helped take the Ravens offense to a level they haven't been before in the Lamar Jackson era. And I think, I thought the Packers kind of made a mistake in letting Aaron Jones walk for Josh Jacobs. I think Josh Jacobs was a great fit there and kind of took that run game to a place they hadn't been previously under Matt LaFleur. The passing game was a different story, but
he carried that offense for multiple weeks.
Right, and in a way that I'm a big Aaron Jones fan. I covered Aaron Jones. I've always liked him as a player. Not sure Aaron Jones could have carried that Packers offense the way Josh Jacobs did for a while there. So, I think the thing that would make me worried if I was a Commanders fan in this game is the right guard, Sam Cosby, tore his ACL in the win over the Lions. And on the interior of that Eagles defensive line is one Jalen Carter, who just continues to break out. I think I'll be putting a couple dollars on Jalen Carter, Defensive Player of the Year next year, just in case that
Not
hits.
a bad look.
It's tough for an interior defensive player, but he's really, really good.
Yeah.
They've got Milt Williams as well, who's had a big year for them. That kind of worries me a little bit. And then, like you said, can you slow down Saquon Barkley? Because the answer for most of the year is no one has been able to.
No.
So we shall see. Do we want to hit Coach Carousel now or take a break?
Let's hit the coaching carousel.
Okay, let's hit Coach Carousel. It's been a wild week of teams finding new coaches, teams thinking they're retaining coaches, and it not happening. So give a quick recap. We have Ben Johnson, Lions star offense coordinator, is now the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Staying within the division, took a little shot at your boy Matt LaFleur in the presser. That's going to be interesting to watch.
What do you make of the idea that I think a lot of people were keen on the idea of getting an experienced head coach to take care of Caleb Williams, as opposed to Ben Johnson, who's never been a head coach before. Obviously, a great offensive coach.
I think that his demeanor is one that I think will work. Like, he seems like he's very much just about the details and about being on your business and whatnot. And I think his offense is going to be great for Caleb Williams as well, because I think that people have come up with this idea that what the Lions were with Jared Goff the last couple of years. Well, how is that going to work with Caleb Williams? You know, Jared Goff is basically a strictly pocket passer. How is Ben Johnson going to mold this to a guy in Caleb Williams who loves to improvise and create outside the pocket and play off schedule? I think the thing is, Ben Johnson's offense will allow Caleb Williams to play on schedule in a way that this past Bears offense couldn't, because it was just so poorly run and the details were off and the route concepts were awful, that I think it's going to be a good fit. And it's going to lead to a large point in a second. So Ben Johnson to the Bears. We've got, as I mentioned before, Aaron Glenn, the Lions defense coordinator, coming home to the Jets, a place where he played for a good long while, made 2 Pro Bowls with them. I'll say I'm done getting excited over Jets head coaching hires. I'll believe it when I see it. It is good that they got their guy, and a guy that, you know, the Jets obviously need a massive shift in vibes and culture. Aaron Glenn was a part of that as a coach the last couple of years with the Lions. Also was a part of that as a player with the Jets back in the 90s. So, again, I'm not getting overly excited about it because I like the Saleh hire when it happened. I've liked a bunch of hires when they happened, and most of them have not panned out.
And you've got to figure out what you're doing at quarterback.
Right. Which there are rumors he might want Rodgers to come back. I don't know. We'll see. I think above anything, they needed a culture change in that building. I think he will provide that. Vrabel to New England, we've hit on that because that was done weeks ago. Last 24 hours have been wild, too, in terms of we've got Liam Cohen to the Jaguars is one of the wildest stories I've heard in a long while.
Oh, man.
To recap, the Jaguars fired Doug Peterson the Monday after the season ended. They retained at the time their general manager, Trent Baalke, who is objectively just has not been good at his job and somehow has survived multiple regimes in Jacksonville. Now, we'll give credit where it's due. You know, he drafted Brian Thomas Jr. with the 19th pick this past year. Might have been the best rookie wide receiver in the league this year. Looks like an absolute superstar. Also took Travon Walker number 1 overall when Aiden Hutchinson was right there at the same position. Went to the Lions at 2.
Yeah.
And more than anything, just hasn't fostered an environment for Trevor Lawrence to really thrive and grow in. And like I said, I don't care. I'll be the last one off the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon. So they shockingly, Shad Khan, their owner, retained Trent Baalke after the season ended, even though it was widely known in league circles that keeping him around was going to hinder the Jaguars' chances of landing a top-notch head coach, which, from everything we heard, if you remove that from the equation, that was a really appealing job, mainly because of Trevor Lawrence, Brian Thomas Jr., guys like that. So, Liam Cohen interviews with Jacksonville, turns it down at first. The Buccaneers are going to make him the highest-paid offense coordinator in the league, which kind of makes sense to me. That offense was cooking this year.
Yeah.
He took that offense to another level, even from what Dave Canales had it running at last year. That offense was great this year. The run game with Bucky Irving was better than it was the previous year. Made sense. Then the Jaguars, Shad Khan realizes, after Liam Cohen takes the name out of the running, maybe Trent Baalke is going to hinder us to a point where we cannot hire a coach good enough to lead this thing moving forward. They fire Trent Baalke on Wednesday. Then all of a sudden yesterday, the reports come out. Liam Cohen did not sign his contract with the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers were trying to get in contact with him all day long. He's in Jacksonville taking a meeting with Shad Khan and the Jaguars brass. And now today it is announced that he is their head coach. He basically came to an agreement with the Buccaneers. The Jaguars said, hold on, now that Baalke's out of the picture, would you think about it? And he said yes. He staked his way out of Tampa, took a flight to Jacksonville, and now he's going to be the next head coach of the Jaguars. I do think it's a good hire, though. His offense was great in Tampa last year. He comes from that Rams tree. And kind of the point I want to loop in Liam Cohen and Ben Johnson in is obviously it's been popular over the last 5 to 10 years to hire these young, hotshot offensive minds that kind of, a lot of them come off the Kyle Shanahan tree, but not all of them do. To be honest, when you look at it, a lot of them have worked, though. Like, it's not just something like, oh, it's an offensive league. Like, let's get an offensive guy, like whether like the trends say it works or not. Let's run down a list of some like the young, hotshot offensive minds that have been hired as head coaches in the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
Sean McVay, absolute hit. Kyle Shanahan, absolute hit. Matt LaFleur, absolute hit. No question about it. Kevin O'Connell, absolute hit. I'm not sure how old Kevin Stefanski is, but I think he's kind of on the younger side. I would label that as a hit. 2-time coach of the year. Dave Canales in Carolina last year, really positive year one, took Bryce Level and his development. And from the beginning of the year, Bryce Young didn't look like an NFL quarterback, and at the end, you're like, okay, this might actually be the Panthers' quarterback of the future.
Stefanski's 42, so.
Yeah, young, yeah. He's got a little gray in the beard, so it makes it look a little bit older. Who else we got here? Who did I just have on my mind? So Canales, yes. Shade Steichen, TBD, good early year, maybe not as much lately. Brian Callahan in Tennessee, that's off to a rough start, but we'll see. I still have a little bit of hope there. And who else? There was one other on my mind. Zach Taylor, I think, with the Bengals, offensively, definitely a hit for sure.
Yeah.
Mike McDaniel, I would qualify Mike McDaniel as a small hit right now. I think that he is kind of held back by the quarterback a little bit in terms of it not being better. But Tua under Mike McDaniel, that offense under Mike McDaniel is way better than it was before. So,
Yeah.
And then it's a lot of hits. I think the one kind of miss that comes to mind, again, like Steichen, Callahan, we'll see. The one miss that kind of comes to mind is maybe Cliff Kingsbury. But even they went to the playoffs. It wasn't like a Cliff in Arizona was an utter disaster. So, yeah, I think hiring young offensive minds that have shown they know what it takes in the modern NFL, I think is a pretty good strategy, which is why I like what the Bears did with Caleb Williams as far as bringing Ben Johnson in to help him out. And I think that Liam Cohen can be the guy to help Trevor Lawrence finally take that step we've all been expecting from him. Because, I mean, Baker Mayfield the last 2 years had played the best ball of his career under Dave Canales, and I think he took another step this year under Liam Cohen.
Yeah, it's just so vital, especially Jacksonville, Chicago. Your job is get that quarterback
Patriots
going,
too.
and then everything else will figure it out.
Patriots as well with Drake May.
Right, yeah, Patriots as well.
They hired Josh McDaniels, very uninspiring, might be okay, who knows. And then the hiring today, Pete Carroll is back at 73 years old. He's back in the NFL. He is signing I believe it's a 3-year deal with an option for a 4th with the Raiders.
To be the oldest head coach in history.
Little uninspiring. I think, I will say this though, Pete will bring stability. Like, I think Pete was brought up for the Bears job, and I think that if you were in favor of Pete for the Bears job, it was, you kind of know what you're going to get. He knows how to run the operation.
Yeah.
I think that his concepts got a little bit stale at the end in Seattle. Obviously, the offensive side of the ball at the end with the Seahawks wasn't where it needed to be. But I think that after the year the Raiders had, and kind of giving Antonio Pierce a little bit of a trial run, I could at least see where they want to say, okay, let's get someone, a proven commodity in the building, stabilize things, and see where we go from there. Question, of course, who's the quarterback?
I don't think their quarterback's on the roster.
Is it Jackson Dart? Are they going to use top 10 pick on Jackson Dart? Like, at this point, I would not put it out of the realm of possibility because the Cam Ward, Shador Sanders are going before. They're going to be on the clock at 7.
I think they're gone by 3.
So, yeah, man, I don't know.
Maybe you bring in a Kirk Cousins, a Sam Darnold, maybe
Jameis Winston?
You know.
That'd be some fireworks at least. So, yeah, it's been a wild week. We still have Cowboys job open. Apparently, Brian Schottenheimer is the favorite for that job, which is a very Cowboys move. And is there another opening I'm missing?
Saints.
The Saints, yes.
Still open.
Who
Alvin Kamara is
it's Darren
endorsing Rizzi, yeah.
said my choice rhymes with fizzy. Although I think Big Mike McCarthy, speaking of the Cowboys, I think he could be very much in the mix for that job. So, to be determined.
Interesting.
A lot of moves this week. All right, One more break. We're going to come back, break down Baseball Hall of Fame, and get out of here with some trivia, so stick with us.
Go fast, keep going. 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 Go fast, keep going.
All right, welcome back into Fast Five Sports. We are going to wrap things up today, talking a little Baseball Hall of Fame. We have 3 new members this year. They are Ichiro, 1 vote short of unanimous, which he has made known he would like to have a drink with whoever it was that did not vote for him to be in the Hall of Fame, is what it is. Billy Wagner, one of the best closers of the 2000s, finally gets the call. I believe that was his last year on the ballot. At CC Sabathia, first ballot Hall of Famer. Obviously, great career, probably best known for his time with the Yankees. Went there, immediately won a World Series with them in 2009. Just a big game pitcher. So, yeah, I think it's a fine class. Ichiro, again, he should have been unanimous. I get it. I will also say there are better players than Ichiro who haven't been unanimous. 2 wrongs do not make a right, but he's it. And, you think about most hits in a season by any player, what he did in Japan before he came over here. I mean, I think it's pretty reasonable to say that if he played his entire career in the United States, he probably would have shattered Pete Rose's hits
yeah.
record. So, yeah.
Just one of the best players, like one of my favorite players just to watch throughout the 2000s.
Yeah.
I loved Ichiro so much, but it's a fun class. I think we were talking when the list came out about Sabathia. I think I remember you and Griffin were a little lower on Sabathia's case.
Yeah, I'm surprised he's the first ballot guy, especially with the way some other guys have had to wait in recent years. I think CC was. I'm not mad at CC getting in. I'm a little shocked first ballot.
Yeah.
Like I think his ERA for his career is like 3.4. I think
it's higher. I think it's higher.
Yeah,
Than that.
but he ended up with 250 wins, 3,000 plus strikeouts, which are pretty big volume barometers. I think that the thing you're looking at with CC is he had a relatively extended stretch where he was one of the best pitchers in the game.
That's what it comes down to for me is if a guy is one of the best handful of pitchers, maybe 5 to 10 for an extended stretch of time, like he was, probably at least 10 years. I mean, plus his playoff performances. I always remember how good he was in Milwaukee, even though it was half of a season. He was just the best pitcher on the world at that moment. To me, that makes the case. He was dominant for a decade, as one of the best handful of guys.
I would say CC probably had like a 7-year run as like one of the premier pitchers in the sport, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
And he probably would have won back-to-back Cy Youngs 07, 08 if he didn't get traded mid-season. And what he did with the Brewers and kind of putting them as a starting pitcher on his back to get them to the playoffs that year was pretty wild for sure. So, yeah, I'm not mad about it. I was a little surprised he was first ballot. I'm not mad about it. What was I going to say to Ichiro? I think the thing people, Ichiro's story is wild too. I mean, people forget. He came over in 2001, immediately, first year, rookie of the year, MVP on a team that won, tied for an MLB record, 116 games.
Yep.
That's pretty wild. And obviously that Mariners team was stacked, but he was right at the center of it. On top of that, great runner, stole a ton of bases, and was a terrific right fielder. So, yeah, you add it all up, and there's no doubt about it. Man, I mean, he stole over 500 bases in his career too. So,
and I think there was a lot of seasons where it felt like he could have been running more.
Yeah.
And he wasn't.
And the thing with him too is a lot of his offensive numbers are kind of dragged down a little bit. Like the last maybe 7 or 8 years of his career weren't as good, but you also have to think about just the impact he had as being maybe not the first Japanese star, because I think most people probably say that was like Hideo Nomo, but I think he was the first position player Japanese megastar. So, yeah.
First Japanese-born Hall of Famer.
Yeah. I mean, all for him being in. If he would have been unanimous, would have had no problem with it. Billy Wagner was dominant too. I remember him living in New York. I remember when he signed with the Mets in 2006, and he was a big part of their success for a little bit. came short of winning a ring with them that year. But, you think about best closers of kind of late 90s, early 2000s, you probably think Mariano, Trevor Hoffman. I think he's kind of right up there after that group. So, yeah, he ended up with, how many saves Billy Wagner ended up with? 422. Yeah, struck out a ton of guys. Top 6 in Cy Young voting a couple times. Yeah, man. Really, really good pitcher. Had a great career. Man, he had a 1.43 ERAs last year in the big leagues in 2010 with the Braves. That's pretty sensational stuff. So, yeah, congrats to Ichiro, Billy Wagner, and CC Sabathia. And I think a couple of guys that did not get in this year are going to get in next year because next year's new players on the ballot, it's rough. It's rough.
It's not a good list. I've got it pulled up here. I think the guy with the best case, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer, but is Cole Hamels.
Yes.
I think has the best case of this group. You got Ryan Braun.
No shot.
Edwin Encarnacion.
Nope.
Hunter Pence.
Nope.
Matt Kemp.
Nope.
And then you get to guys like Daniel Murphy and Shin-Soo Choo and
Neil Walker.
Matt Wieters, Cardinals legend.
Hamels has a chance. I mean, Hamels kind of fits into the criteria of really good for like.
Do you think he's a guy who may get votes like down the line? Because I think right out the gate, I don't think he's going to get. I think a lot of voters are going to see 163 wins and instantly get turned off.
Yep, and he finished with 2,500 strikeouts. You're going with the peak, but to me, I think next year is the year.
Top 5 Cy Young finish.
Yeah, like 4 times top 8, once top 5. Yeah. Really good. I could see him getting in down the line, but I think it might take him like 5+ years too. Yeah. To me, I think the names I'm looking out for next year would be Carlos Beltran, who I think is a Hall of Famer, and Andrew Jones.
Yep.
Because I think Andrew Jones is like a 72% guy this year, and you need 75 to get in. Usually your percentage gets higher as you go along.
So I was reading Jason Stark's article on the Hall of Fame voting this year, and he mentioned that Sabathia's candidacy could open the door for Andy Pettitte. Because if you look at Pettitte and Sabathia, their career numbers are almost identical. They've both got about 60 WAR, about 250 wins. I think Pettitte's ERA is probably a big reason he's not in. But
3.85. He was a top 5 Cy Young guy.
When I think about
4
playoff
times.
performances, though,
I
think
and that's
Pettitte.
the thing is that he was money in the playoffs. It felt like, well, the career ERA isn't fantastic, but I don't know. He won an ALCS MVP. It just felt like he was right at the center of all those Yankees championship teams. He won 5 World Series, so maybe. Not that I think that like team accomplishments in baseball should matter a ton to your Hall of Fame candidacy, but yeah, I could see it.
Yeah, only a 3-time All-Star too. Yeah, which probably.
I got to squint a little more on that one, but like I'm not totally opposed to it.
It's just really interesting that the numbers compared to Sabathia are very, very similar. Yeah. So I wouldn't hate that selection if he got in.
All right, we got some trivia to take us home.
I do.
All right, let's do
so
it.
We've got fittingly Hall of Fame based. So we know Ichiro fell just one short of being the second unanimous player, so Mariano Rivera is still the only one in 2019. So Ichiro received 99.7% of the vote. I'm going to give you a group of players, and I'm going to have you guess what percent they received when they got into the Hall. So how far off they were from unanimous. Okay. And there's no real rhyme or reason to this group of players other than I think they all had a very good candidacy for being unanimous.
Yeah, okay.
So Cal Ripken in 2007.
97?
98.5, so a little higher. Mike Schmidt in 1995.
That's got to be 99, right?
96.5. Best third baseman of all time.
Best third baseman
4%
easily.
Of the voters didn't accept.
These voters are haters.
Ted Williams in 1966.
I'm going to guess there were some writers that didn't like him, so I'll go like 94.
93.4.
That's insane.
I mean, come on. Jackie Robinson in 1962.
I'm sure there were some writers that didn't like him for a variety of reasons.
In 62, yeah.
So let's go 88.
Real off, 77.5%.
Okay.
Jackie Robinson. Bob Gibson in 1981.
83.
84%.
Close. Okay.
Pretty close. Tony Gwynn in 2007.
92.
97.6.
Okay, so Gwen was close.
So they respected him. Stan Musial in 1969.
95.
93.2.
Okay.
And then Willie Mays in 1979.
The best player has ever lived, in my opinion. Willie Mays. We'll go 91.
94.7%.
Yeah, I mean
So-
that's the best player. I mean like Willie Mays, Ted Williams. Willie Mays to me is the best hit player of all time. Ted Williams has a good argument as best hitter of all time.
Yeah.
Mike Schmidt, best third baseman of all time. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier. Like, come on, man, this is ridiculous. These pulling some haters
So
over the years.
the idea of unanimous is really a new thing. Like
Griffey was
before
close.
Rivera,
Cheater was
it
close.
Right. And before these guys, it was like not even an option.
Right.
So kind of silly, but at least we're getting over it. And we've got a guy coming up who I think is going to get it.
Yeah, and Albert's one that I've got my eye on for sure.
I think he's going to.
I don't know. Like I feel like some hating voter is gonna hold the back half of his career against him, which would be ridiculous if they
revoke their vote if that
For
happens.
sure.
Just revoke it.
I'm all for making all the ballots public.
Yeah.
Stand by it. Stand on it. All right, is that all we got today?
That's it.
All right. That's a wrap for today's edition of Fast Five Sports. Really good episode. Thank you all for tuning in. We will be back, I believe, next Friday. No, actually, I will not be here next Friday. I'm going to a wedding. So hopefully Griffin Deveray can hold down the fort next Friday.
TBD.
So I'll be back in 2 weeks. But for now, for Jacob Gallant, I'm Matt Enfield saying thanks so much for tuning in. But we are out of here. See you later.